Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Black Talk Platform as we make our return after nearly 2 years being on hiatus. My name is Dr. Deborah D. Jenkins. I am the host and the founder of Black Talk Platform, and I'm very happy to have you tune in to the return of Black Talk Platform. Over the years that we've been doing Black Talk platform, and my very first guest, and now currently a co host, was none other than my brother in Christ Jesus, Pastor Anthony Davis. Unfortunately, Pastor Davis could not be here for our return tonight due to family priorities, but I'm praying that he'll be with me next week as we continue to rebuild our voice in this space. I'm so excited. I hate that I had to be away for 2 years, well, about 18 months to be honest with you. But as the young people say, or as we all say, life has been lifing. And I praise God that He still desires to use my voice to share messages for the Black community that are both enriching, uplifting, and educational so that we can move further into our liberation space. A new segment that I'm going to introduce this time around is called shout outs. I'm always going to be scouring the internet and listening to family and friends as they tell me about incredible Black people here in the United States and abroad who are doing great things for the uplifting of our community worldwide. One of my mentors, for those of you who are new to Black Talk Platform, you may not know, but that is Dr. Amos Wilson. I was a student of his. I remain a student of his. I reread his writings, and there is so much to be said about Pan Africanism. And I want to share with you all Dr. Amos Wilson's definition of Pan Africanism so that when I share the shout out person, you'll understand. And even as many are rejecting Pan Africanism, I understand why. But in his definition, it will make clear demarcations between what is now and what the intent was by him and others who really sort of cornered and defined what Pan Africanism is. Dr. Amos Wilson defined Pan Africanism not as a cultural slogan, and that is what I typically see today, but rather as a psychopolitical strategy created for three purposes: for the survival, the empowerment, and the sovereignty of African descended people globally. Do I need to repeat that definition? And welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, Reverend Barbara, for being here, and Deacon Juanita Presley, my sister, for being here. Let me repeat Dr. Amos Wilson's definition of Pan Africanism so that you, however you define yourself, you will at least have a luminary, definer, one of the original Pan Africanists to define what it is and what it is not. And you'll be able to judge for yourself what you see as it relates to this global desire to embrace the diaspora. But you want to be informed as to what that is and what it is not. So Dr. Wilson defined Pan Africanism not as a cultural slogan, which is often what we see in 2025, but as a psychopolitical strategy for the survival, the empowerment, and sovereignty of African descended people globally. Having shared that with you, my shout out tonight is none other than Captain Ibrahim Traore, the current president of Burkina Faso on the continent of Africa. Why? Okay, so as I said, I'm always going to be scouring the internet for wonderful, especially Black Americans who I can give a shout out to. But I'm also a global thinker, and Captain Traore has done for his people in Burkina Faso what we have not been able to consistently do for ourselves here in the United States. And that young man deserves a great shout out and recognition from actually only leasing out mines, gold mines, to foreign entities, primarily France, and only being paid like $5 million a year, $5 billion, excuse me, a year for their mine. In his short time as the president of Burkina Faso, he has been able to realize for the Burkina Faso people over $18 billion in gold revenue. And I think this is only since 2020, 2022 rather. This is something to be applauded by every Black person walking the earth because it speaks directly to Dr. Amos Wilson's definition. We are always in search of our liberation. And by reclaiming at least 5 foreign held gold mines in Burkina Faso, he has been able to deliver for his people wealth. And he's not doing it in a way that he's setting it up for himself. He has created jobs. They are creating their own products. Wheat, they're growing, they have their own wheat factories. I just implore you all to go and do your own search on Captain Ibrahim Traore, and you will be hopefully as impressed with him as I am. I am so impressed with him, but I also want to share a word of caution. For someone to expel France like he did, they didn't see it coming because they didn't believe, and they don't believe, that Black people are able to think for themselves. This man is highly intelligent. And I've always, one of my mentors right here in the United States, here's another shout out, Dr. Washington. Long ago, when we'd be going to different reverend minister conferences or situations where clergy were invited, the first thing I saw when I walked into one of these settings was Dr. Washington. Now, this man is one of New York State's greatest preachers, and also he has also been a leader in at every level of the Baptist Association in New York State. And I would see him sitting in the back. And so he told me at that time, he said, "Daughter," he said, "you don't need to sit in the front. The best seats are in the back, because in the back, you get to see everything that's going on. And if it's important to you that you be recognized, people will know where you are, and they'll eventually learn who you are." Now I'm paraphrasing. Dr. Washington might call me up tomorrow and saying that is not exactly what I said to you, but that I want you to understand that this is what Captain Ibrahim Traore did. He watched as Burkina Faso was pillaged and the people scorned by the French all his life. And one day he decided no more. And he decided, you know what? We're going to take back our country. Now, I want you to pray for Captain Ibrahim Traore if you are praying people, because he is constantly under threat of his life, to the point where he's had to send his wife and children away in safety to keep them alive. Pray for people like that, because if you want to see a true example of political power, you need look no further than Captain Ibrahim Traore. I have alerts on YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter. You know, it was Twitter when we first started Black Talk platform back in 2020. So much has changed, but I have alerts set on Google for whatever news is coming out of Burkina Faso, because For a yet to be liberated people here in the United States, known as Black Americans, we need stories of hope like what we receive from a Captain Ibrahim Traore. So, shout out to Captain Ibrahim Traore. I'm happy again to have all of you viewing tonight. I have no high hopes that we'll get those numbers that we once had back in 2020. What I called Black Talk Platform into being was because in 2020, my mother became ill. And those who know me know that I've been out on the street marching, leading marches and rallies and things of that nature. And after the murder, I don't care if Derek Chauvin is trying to get a new trial. That is his American right to seek an appeal and to seek a new trial and all that stuff. I don't care what they say. He murdered that man. I don't care how much drugs may or may not have been in George Floyd's body. He was murdered before all of our eyes. And I'm not here to talk about the rollbacks from the feel-good companies that have taken place since 2020 and their pleas, their vows rather to support Black businesses. I'm not here to talk about that tonight. I think we have a much bigger concern facing us immediately. And that is what I want to sort of get into tonight. And so at that time in 2020, since I could no longer hit the streets because I had to be there to support my mother and to keep her safe as we were all experiencing COVID-19, I decided to voyeur into or take a voyage into online activism through Black Talk Platform. And it has served me well, and it has helped me to continue to craft my messaging. But tonight, I want to help you rewind to a time last year in 2024 when the messaging coming out of the Democratic National Convention, led by our then President Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris, was that there was an existential threat to the democracy in the United States. And while I didn't doubt that in 2024, I believe the messaging was all wrong, starting with something as simple as the fact that was not faced by the president and the vice president at the time, was Project 2025. Project 2025 came out roughly around October 2023. And if you don't believe me, you can go back to some archived episodes of Black Talk Platform, and you'll see where I began to speak about it before the MSNBCs and the CNNs and the White House itself started to raise the threat level around what was to come if Donald Trump was reelected as president of the United States via Project 2025. There would indeed be an existential threat to democracy if he were allowed to reclaim the White House. And so here we are. He has reclaimed the White House as we are all living through this. And I really want to be very clear. There were a lot of mistakes made in the Biden administration, in the Harris campaign. A lot of mistakes made. And that is why we don't have a president, Kamala Harris, right now. I think it is a disservice to us all to say the country's not ready for a Black woman president. The country's not ready for a woman president. It's a disservice, and we do not think critically. I've arisen at this conclusion based off of my own actions after the election, the first election of Donald Trump. And I've said it also on previous Black Talk platforms that I spent the very first year full of hatred. I mean, my son had to show me it was hatred. And I'm sharing this in all transparency because who am I not to? As a believer and follower of Jesus Christ, we know that the Bible tells us not to hate. But if you examine your own actions, as I examined mine after a year of hating Donald Trump because he became the president, and I saw him as a racist. I saw him as hateful. There are a whole lot of adjectives I could use and apply to him and how I felt for that whole year. Had a good friend who, I mean, I think we love each other, so we just stopped talking to each other, who was a supporter and I believe remains a supporter of Donald Trump. But during that time, we just, for respect for one another, out of respect for one another, we just really didn't talk about anything, about anything. And I believe I'm taking this on myself. And she and I have not had that conversation, but I know she knows how I felt. Um, I take it on myself because it was me. It was I who had the hatred. And my son said, "Ma, you really hate him." And it was like a woo. And my son was an adult. And I still care about how my children perceive me. And I had to sit with that and realize that I had to let go of the hatred that I had for him. He literally did what everybody who runs for public office does. He won. And yes, a very flawed character, but if I'm going to be who I say I am, I had to get the hatred out of my heart. But not just only that, that of course, as you're a believer, a follower of Jesus Christ, you know that you have to have a whole lot of repentance and then you change your ways. So with acknowledging that I hated him at the time, I was able to come to the conclusion that, like it or not, he wasn't always wrong. He's just a horrible, horrible messenger. And whether or not I still believe that he's hateful, I do, because you're the president and you allow things to happen that are hateful. And you're saying hateful things. So he's still the same person. I just simply don't hate him anymore. What I do is like how I was taught by Dr. Washington. I observe. And what I'm observing that has brought me to the conclusion that we really need to sit and spend time talking about the true threat to democracy in the United States is the fact that, yes, he is the president, but I believe that more power lies in the hands of those who are the creators of and who are pushing the agenda of Project 2025 than him. He is merely the face of Project 2025. He is the face of this MAGA movement. But the real power resides in the hands of those who are behind the scenes. So, what does this mean? This threat to democracy? You'll never hear me being that person who jumps on the all people bandwagon. I am first and foremost for Black Americans and how life will look for us always. And I say that without apology. Every other group is comfortable doing that. Black Americans are the only group that I know who have a problem with standing for their own. Well, I am not one of those people. I love my people with all my heart, even though I can also acknowledge and recognize our flaws. But I'm always, always going to be ready to fight for our sovereignty, for our empowerment, and yes, for our survival. Let me share a few things, and I have more. And next week, I may get into one or two others, but I only want to share three and just break it down to you from my perspective, of course. I am a scholar of sorts, so I do have that behind me, but I really want to try to reach you as Brother Joe Madison used to say. I want to put the information where the ghosts can reach it because, and we're not calling you ghosts, we just want it to be said in a language that everyone, doesn't matter what your background is, that you can understand what's being put down. So, the very first threat that we have to examine is voter suppression and restricted political participation. This has been going on since these, at least at this high level, since the second election of President Barack Obama. And it's just getting increasingly worse. As yesterday, we heard the Supreme Court side with Texas in their redistricting effort, saying that they reserve the right to allow the lower court's order to stand, to not interfere with that. And we are happy to know that we had the same three liberal justices dissent from the majority opinion that was given. But as it relates to us, voting is still very important. It is very important. And who we elect into public office really can dictate for decades to come how our survival really will be. Let me share a few things that you want to consider as we go into next year, 2022, a very, very important midterm election year where all Congress people are up for reelection. We know earlier this week that the seat that they were hopeful to be able to flip in Texas to Democrat, it remains with the Republicans, giving the Republican an even wider majority in the House of Representatives at 220. In order to have the majority, there needs to be 218. So what does that mean? We have, I believe, as Democrats, we have currently, I believe, 215. If someone has, it is so good to see you too, my sister Reps. I missed you. I really did. And I thank you for tuning in. We have, I believe, and someone put in the chat if I'm wrong about the number, the Democrats, and I say we because I am still a registered Democrat, but always reserving the right to vote for whoever the heck I believe will better serve the Black people. And it's not always Democrats. At this juncture, though, at 215, they have a 5-member majority. We need the Democratic Party, that is, needs to pick up at least 3 more votes. I need somebody to tell me if I'm right or wrong about those numbers. Thank you. And yes, I will, before closing out, talk about the Reparations Commission here in New York State. Thank you. And I promise you I'll do that because I won't be with you all long. Try to do the hour, and we're already at the 20-minute mark. So the margin has grown for the Republicans. And if you've been paying attention like I have, they have literally abdicated their responsibility to the executive branch. The executive branch is not the strongest branch unless the legislative branch gives it its power. And that is what we have witnessed in the last 11 months since Donald Trump has returned to the White House. It is as if the legislative branch does not exist to ensure checks and balances on the executive branch. Donald Trump gets to do whatever he wants to do. And that is a part of the reason why there is an existential threat to democracy and to Black people specifically. The more power those who are in this dark shadow political party, those unelected people, they've always existed. They're in both parties. But right now the threat is coming from those who are moving the agenda of Project 2025. And we have to be mindful of that. And so when we see that the Supreme Court is allowing Texas to redistrict as they desire, it is going to have a profound negative impact on Black Americans. The redistricting will have some people, some of your favorites like Jasmine Crockett, her seat may be threatened. Now, I'm hopeful that she will run for the Senate. You know, that's what everybody's hoping. But at the reality is, we actually need her to keep that seat, and so there's a lot of work to be done. The problem with trying to convince you all that the threat to our voter IDs and ability to vote and redistricting, the problem that I'm having in my attempt to convince you how important it is that we stay involved on the political level in terms of voting is because the Democratic National Convention, the DNC, is, in my opinion, still in shambles. After losing so heartily last year, they're still in shambles. And I know I may sound crazy to you. You might think, why is she contradicting? I'm not contradicting myself. You and I have witnessed for the last 11, almost 12 months now, on the 20th, right? or the 20th of January. So almost a year now. The Republicans are doing whatever the president asks. The only thing, and I don't want to give them a big shout out because there's so many other things that they've left undone. The only thing that they've done that's been partially good is the fight to get the Epstein files revealed. That's been the only thing that tells me they have souls. You know what I'm saying? I mean, really. And I love that because at the end of the day, you had all of these people, except for one person in the House of Representatives, say that children are off limits. So these victims are getting a sense of justice, even though it may not be monetary. And that's not the biggest thing. They lost childhoods. And so we will recognize the fact that they did come together, except for this one congressperson, right? But the Senate unanimously voted to release the files. So other than that, there is no shining light in this current Congress. And we have to be ready for what is to come in 2026. If the Democrats can't get themselves together and put forth some people who are really, really worthy of representing the Black community. Now, I know you're going to say, but we have the Congressional Black Caucus. Do you really want me to go there? Do you? I can. I'll spend a minute there. I'll spend a minute there. Actually, if you are listening, and I'm only watching the comments on one of the 3 streams that we have going on right now, so I cannot interact with you, but I will after the recording. Tell me one United States, either House of Representatives or United States senators who are truly pushing a Black agenda. Now, when I say a Black agenda, I mean things like what's going to build up the family, not give access to abortions that actually tear down the family. We have traditionally been a conservative people, not in the sense of right wing versus left wing. We always valued family. It wasn't until we were convinced, and I say we as women were convinced by the Margaret Sangers of the world who actually wanted to kill Black people, convinced by political figures even today who proudly proclaim that they had abortions so that they can pursue their careers. Some of us have come from long lines of grandparents who were one of 10, 11, 12. That's the Black family. So you tell me, please share with me which one of our Black elected officials on the national level, either House of Representatives or Senate, are pushing for the upbuilding of the Black family. I'll wait, but as I'm waiting, let me continue on. I am not saying that some of them are not doing good things in their communities. Some of them may be, but I don't mean a turkey drive. I don't mean toys for tots. Because what good is a turkey meal when you're facing food insecurity every other day of the year? Because you make just a little too much to qualify for food stamps, which they're going to continue to reduce the amount that the current recipients are receiving. What good is it for your child to have a toy when he or she doesn't have a bedroom because they're homeless? I mean, I want you to think about what we applaud in the Black community. Why are we applauding these superficial outreaches from people who look like us, but they don't live in our communities. They live just on the edge of their districts so they can continue to be reelected. They don't pass the mantle. You have people who are 70, 80, and sickly. I don't think 70 is old. I don't think 80 disqualifies. I just think they're sickly and they should be preparing for secession. But no, it's been good being elected to United States level public office. They have been enriched. They have the best health care of anyone in the country. And yet, right now, they continue to fight. They continue to fight over extending health, the Obamacare, so that 25 million people will not have to have these increased premiums and deny themselves health care. So I want you all to think about what's actually happening every day. Now, I know New York politics very well, where our congressmen and women, our United States senators, we have Kirsten Gillibrand and we have Chuck Schumer right now, but they actually work with the state legislators to ensure that the Black community and other communities also, but they work to ensure they actually deliver things for us. That is not the case across the United States. New York is a little different from a lot of places. And I'm not saying all of them do either. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to name drop tonight other than those two, right? Because we have too many Congress people. But they're not perfect either. Don't actually ask me to start telling you how I feel about them. I am saying that protecting our right to vote is an extremely important thing that we must do collectively. And so wherever you may be in the country, and I'm going to give you some numbers that I've run perhaps next week. Especially in Georgia. Georgia is a state to watch, I believe, because we've watched for years as voter suppression, voter ID. We know Rudolph Giuliani, who this man just pardoned, oh my goodness gracious, is bankrupt because of his lies about a mother and her daughter during the 2020 election. And I'm pretty sure I heard this week the president again refer to the election of 2020 having been rigged. Are you serious? And these are the things. So you and we have to be very careful not to play the role of political fandom. I am certainly no fan of any politician right now. I am interested in those who will work on behalf of the Black community. And I will qualify what I mean when I say the Black community in a second. But they've been purging voter rolls. The gerrymandering continues, and the closure of voting sites, which means that especially when you're outside of urban areas that have public transportation readily available, and you have to rely on driving. And so if they're closing voter locations, that's going to reduce the number of people who are able to vote. Why? Because they don't have the means to get to the new voter locations. This is a serious threat to our agenda as Black people. And once we are able to coalesce around issues that impact us specifically, we will then be able to exercise our political power in the way that the elders and our ancestors fought to have us enjoy and exercise. The second thing that comes to mind about the threat to democracy is the erosion of civil rights protections. First of all, I'm glad Sister Reps asked me about what's going on here with the New York State Reparations Commission. It's a lot. It's a lot. But when I think about how the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department sent Asheville, North Carolina, just as they were about to start disseminating funds for reparations to those they've been working with. They were literally one of the first, if not the first city to take up the cause of reparations. Well, they basically received a cease and desist letter from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. And I'm going to say this, and I'm not the most politically correct person, but I do want you to recognize who heads that division. It is a non-black person, and I don't believe that a black person has to necessarily lead the Civil Rights Division, but it is an East Indian descent woman. And you all can be this great big wide tent if you want to, and you will not align with the type of ideals that I have. I am black first, always. A lot of Indians from the country of India do not care about or even like black people. And so it was the optics for me when I read her letter to the people of Asheville, parenthetically, who are predominantly white, who decided that justice needed to occur on behalf of descendants of enslaved black people in the United States. The optics are horrible. The letter is public. You can literally go to to their X account, or you can just go to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and you will see the really nasty letter she sent to them. And what was the result? The result was that Asheville, they basically stopped their efforts. They were ready to disseminate, I believe, about $1 million. So we are up against a lot. And so we really have to stay attuned, and please stop thinking that people, because they are black, like their skin looks like ours, or because they're another minority, that they're going to look out for the interest of black people. It's just, I don't even know if that's a natural thing, because everyone else looks out for their own. It is only black people that, in my experience, who will put other people's concerns and needs before our own. There was a politician here in New York who recently was reelected, and I was, as it were, a lot of clergy on a call with that politician, and they really didn't have a threat to losing their seat. They really didn't, but they wanted to not take for granted the clergy community, whatever. Um, and there was a time for questions and answers, because all I was hearing was that we should be more concerned about the migrants to New York, right? And don't get me wrong, anyone who knows me knows that I will defend anybody's right to exist in my space. I work with migrants. I have been an ESL teacher in Washington Heights, where everybody was either undocumented or they were migrants or immigrants, to the United States, primarily from Dominican Republic, Central and South America. So don't start with me on that. But this politician was like, it is your responsibility as clergy, black clergy, to support them. And so it wasn't enough that the majority who have been being harmed in New York have really been from Central South America. I think the politician wanted to appeal to us because of the color of the skin of the black migrants, the black undocumented. Don't let people use you because other people look like you. And so after listening to, what he had to say, I asked a question. I said, well, what are your policies specific to Black Americans? I was the only one, the only clergy to ask anything about Black Americans. And he hummed and hawed, and before he could think of what it was, and what he did say was valid, because he had a personal experience in this particular area. And I don't want to share it because you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. But it's easy enough for you to find out. I am sick of Black politicians putting everybody else in our tent and never centralizing the needs of Black people, Black Americans. We are being marginalized, erased by Black people. And that's why I said I don't have a lot good to say about the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus. I remember, and somebody who's watching, if you have the better date, because I didn't intend to share this, um, in 2020, the CBC took a survey and asked what were the pressing needs that Black Americans wanted them to fight for. And one of those needs came back as reparations. Right after that, they totally buried that. They didn't talk about it, and they didn't fight for it. It became immigrant rights. And I feel like that's an imbalance. First of all, you're not even looking at your own data. And secondly, you're not fighting for the very people who keep sending you back there year after year, because we are holding out hope that you'll wake up and truly represent us. That's crazy. That makes no sense to me. And so stop voting for people because they look like you. Because as surely as they look like you, when they have an opportunity to abandon you, they will. They will. And we've seen it time and time again. And that is why we are still in 2025 fighting for our own civil rights. 2026 is probably a more critical year than last year was, because the power that the legislative branch truly, out of the three, the legislative branches, they have the most power, but you wouldn't know it the way this current Congress is behaving. It is so important that we re-elect Democrats. This is me saying it. You might not agree, and that's okay. I think that's one of the beauties of being in the United States, is that we can disagree. I don't think we have to be disagreeable, but I do think, and I think I can listen to other people's perspectives. And I think one of the problems why many of you might be saying she's out of her mind, she lost her mind, is because not only are the Democrats in shambles right now, they really, really did go so far to the left around social issues that they're championing, rather than the things that the American people who were Democrats, many of whom defected and became independents during that election cycle, like myself, and others went to the Republican Party. They should be working their butts off today and through all of the primaries to get us back. You have people, I'm not the only one on a platform saying it would behoove us to get the Democrats back in office. The problem is, just like it was in 2020, we never asked for anything. We allowed them to fearmonger us so much that we're just like, oh, if it's a big D, I'm voting down ballot, and we get nothing. Case in point, when President Biden had an opportunity to choose a vice presidential running mate, had the former congresswoman down in Georgia, and I liked her a lot, and I cannot think of her name right now. She's doing fine. She's fine. She's still in office. She's doing government work down there. She's fine. And I really wish he would have chosen her, because had he chosen her, it would have satisfied the right wingers who were like, oh, they want to defund the police. She was a cop. So, she would have been a good choice. But they didn't get anything for, when I say they, I'm talking about the legacy organizations that he dressed down, if I might remind you. And it was released, all of them, NAN, Urban League, NAACP. He dressed down those leaders. told them that they better get in line and they better start making friends with the Latinos because they're coming up. What? If you're in New York, you're already friends with the Latinos because we all live together. We've grown up together. What are you talking about? But that's how he spoke to these civil rights leaders. And we let it happen. We got nothing for him selecting Vice President Harris. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. We got nothing. And guess what? After 4 years, we still got nothing. Now, where are you apologists for the Biden-Harris administration? I'm telling you, listen. I'm doing a class on Vice President Harris's book because it is good. And let me tell you, when her book dropped, you had all the Democrats, and that's why I'm saying, I know I'm crazy asking you all to go and support them again. They came out against her because she dared tell the truth. Can you imagine the knots in that woman's stomach after all she endured in them 107 days? You had big names like President Obama. You had Hillary Clinton. You had all these people, Chuck Schumer. You had Nancy Pelosi. You had all these people in the background holding their votes or their support from her. She had to deal with all of that. And yes, she still had a formidable campaign. The reason I'm going to do a class about her book, it is not because I like history. I'm a historian, right? So I'm a political scientist, actually. So not necessarily a historian, but I connect history with politics. So it was historic, her election as vice president. Okay, that was great. But when I think about how she went to the Freedmen's Bureau, which was set up by President Lincoln for freed slaves so that we could have a leg up after the Civil War and as Reconstruction was beginning, how Vice President Harris went to the Freedmen's Bureau and brought in the whole tent when it was meant for descendants of enslaved people in the United States. You can't make up this stuff. You cannot make me like what is not in the best interest of Black people, Black American people. You can't. You can't. Now, parenthetically, I had one of my favorite last students when at the last college I was at. I'm no longer at the college. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute or next week, because we only have 13 minutes left. She is an awesome young lady. I want to see her go far in life. She is Pakistani American. But let me show you how we form allies. We form allies not because people look like us or share our skin tone. We form allies by those who respect our struggle and understand that our struggle has made it possible for them to enjoy life in the United States. And if people other groups don't have an appreciation for your ancestors and mine, like the civil rights director of the DOJ, she doesn't. If they don't have a respect for our struggle and what we've accomplished here and the pathways we've made for everybody, excluding none, if there's not that appreciation, be careful who you call an ally. This young lady, born and raised here, but has a great love for her home. And she would love to go back one day and be in politics. They don't really allow that too much because she wasn't born there, but she is nevertheless, she has the dual citizenship. That's an ally. That's who you and I should be looking to. But no, they had this city council woman a couple of years ago too, who got hot mic talking about he's with the Blacks out in LA. And yet the vice president was like, okay, the Freedmen's Bureau is we're going to have a Latino initiative. She did speak about its history, but she ran right past that. So you all are just voting because people look like you. You all are getting into fights in social media over people who have not served your interest. I'm losing folks now because I'm talking about your sacred people. While your sacred people have ridden off into the sunset, and we are still fighting for voter rights and civil rights. We're still fighting in 2025. And the third thing, and I may have one more I can fit in these 10 minutes, is the disinformation and manipulation targeted at Black communities. You have so many social media accounts that impersonate Black people in a very negative way. And we, with this man being in office, President Trump, he has again ignited the most racist corners of this country. I fear for our people because just under the surface, there may be a new civil war raging, and it would be against us. They hate us. The hateful whites, they hate us. The MAGA types who are hateful, they hate us. So, we've been targeted as activists. We've been threatened as activists. And we've been made to look less than decent as people. And that's just not so. So why does all of this matter? It matters because democracy depends on an informed electorate, an informed public. And if you and I are not listening to people like me who say things that hurt your ears, that you don't like, because it seems like there's an all-out attack on a Black person, it's not. I don't believe that we're all created equal as Black people, meaning that if I'm elected and I get into office on a platform where I'm going to centralize the needs of the Black American people while not harming anyone else, and then I get into that office and I do the exact opposite, why should I have a fandom? Why should you support me? Why should you reelect me? It just doesn't make sense. Are you all like counting how many Blacks are elected? Are you counting how many invitations you receive so that you can take a picture, get a photo op, and then come back and say, well, guess who I was with? I was with this senator. I was with this congressperson. What difference does that make if you go back into your community and you're clutching your own pearls because there is an impoverished Black person who might knock you upside the head because they're unable to get a job. They're unable to feed their children and they turn to crime. And yet you have rich celebrities living in the Hamptons, New York, starting a whole slogan, defund the police. When I don't remember, because she is Hollywood royalty, has never lived in the hood or in dangerous communities where there is a potential constant threat to her life. But nevertheless, Black people jumped on the bandwagon of defund the police, forgetting that our communities, many of our communities, are dangerous for us to walk in. Just turn on the news and you hear horrific stories. Most crime is proximity based, meaning that if you live in a predominantly Black community, if you live in a predominantly white community or predominantly Asian community, Spanish community, the most harm is going to come from within those same communities. Why? Because it's proximity. We live near each other. If there's poverty there, it doesn't matter if it's a white community or otherwise, or a Black community. The threat to you is going to be from people who look like you. But yet we jumped on this bandwagon about defund the police. So do you think by defunding the police is how we get police to stop sitting on our necks? To stop and frisking us? No, that's not. I just didn't feel it was the solution. And here we are. Mayor-elect Mandani, he was, I guess I don't want to, he's who he is, right? But the NYPD has a short of 1,000 officers. And he just said on yesterday that he will be seeking to fill those positions. Does that mean he turned on his promises? No, it's already budgeted. They just don't have them. People are retiring. And then, of course, we have those who are like, oh my goodness, he's a democratic socialist. Oh my goodness, this city is going to go to hell. So they're leaving the force. That is their prerogative. So he has to backfill those positions and add on till he gets to the 35,000. So are you gonna abandon him because, oh, he's hiring more cops? It's gonna be worse than no, he's just doing what the city council and the mayor's office has agreed to do, to fully fund the NYPD with officers. That's what I'm trying to say, people. Look beyond the surface. Take your immediate emotions out of it so that you can act on your own behalf. New York City is just an easy example because I live here, but the country is burning with this right wing stuff, this Congress that's ineffective. They are ineffective. You think they're effective? Mike Johnson had to sell his soul to remain the speaker because he was on the way out. And his soul has been sold to the president of the United States. He is not going to do anything that is contrary to what the president wants. And because of that type of leadership, he has essentially made the House of Representatives ineffective. And we need to start thinking about and be very strategic about how we go about making those changes. And that will be listening to every politician, especially those of you who go to church. Talk to your pastors and tell them to stop bringing these men and women in there when it's election period season who never return. I know of a congressperson who lost his seat because pastors said that they opened their church to him, had many people coming, had them coming in, but never came back after they supported the election. Come on. I applaud those pastors. All of you need to go to your pastors and say, don't let them come in here if they're not coming with a black agenda and if they don't vow to keep coming back. It doesn't matter if they're black or white. If they are pushing an agenda for black people so that we can maintain the advances that our elders literally bled that we might have, I'm all for supporting them. I'm pleased with our congressperson so far, but I believe that if anyone has schooled our congressperson about me, my congressman already knows that if I disagree, I'm going to make it known. But I think genuinely, he's not only for black people, he is for the people. But it helps his cause to be for a black agenda. So listen, I want you to be in my class too. So I'm going to get ready to get out of here. I prayed before I got on here. I said, Father, don't let me be so emotional, but this stuff really matters. This stuff really matters. For those of you who don't know, my mother and my grandmother were part of the Montgomery bus boycott. We've not seen anything like it since. And if I don't owe it to every ancestor, they are both ancestors now. If I don't owe it to any other ancestors, I owe it to my mama and my grandmama to continue to raise awareness and to educate the Black community about how much we've lost and what we still yet have to gain. This has been Dr. Deborah D. Jenkins, your host for Black Talk Platform. I do hope you'll tune in next week. And if the Lord's will, Pastor Davis will be sitting in the co-host spot with me. We already had some things we want to talk about. We're going to continue on because there is, in my opinion, an existential threat to democracy, which directly will impact the Black community. Good night, and thank you all for tuning in. God bless you all, and I'll say more about those classes coming up. Oh, I got 30 seconds. I'm sorry. The New York Reparations Commission, we will be in Utica, New York. We are going all over the state to get these testimonies and testimonials. We we have a group of Black Americans who are going throughout this state. They are going throughout this state to make the case for Black Americans. And I, for one, am very proud of them. And this is me speaking as Dr. Deborah Jenkins. I am not speaking as a commissioner. I am speaking on behalf of the Black community about Black Americans who are making sure to hold our commission, the New York State Community Commission on Reparations and Remedies, feet to the fire on behalf of Black Americans. More information to come. God bless you all. Peace.